GZDude13 original.
Hey everybody, GZDude13 here.
And TJ Scorpio here.
You've waited for it, and here it is!
It's our pleasure to present Red's Wolfe.
I can't believe it's actually here!
I know, right? You guys are in for a treat.
I'm so pumped! I can't believe it's here! Let's do this! Woo!
Well, while GZDude13 celebrates, let's get this story started.
Once, a very long time ago, there was a family that lived happily and comfortably in a prosperous and busy little town. Fenrir and Martha Hayes were a happy couple and proud parents of a young son named Martin, who was 13 years of age, and a young daughter named Fenretta, of only 7 years of age. Fenrir had worked as both a carpenter and a blacksmith in order to provide for his family, and soon planned to uproot his wife and children from the busy little town in order to live closer to his wife's elderly mother, who lived on the southern edge of the Nightroad Woods. Martha was a supportive wife and loving mother. She provided for her family as best she could and raised her children with love and kindness. Martin was a hard-working boy who enjoyed working alongside his father. He also loved his younger sister, Fenretta, who he affectionately called Red, and was fiercely protective of her. The sun had set over 3 hours ago, and the busy town had settled down under the new blanket of stars. Yellow lights could be seen shining from the windows of many of the cottages and buildings throughout the town. Despite how lively it may be during the day, the night brought silence, and if not for the lights at the windows, the town would have been seen as if the inhabitants had all been dead. The silence was almost absolute, save for the crickets and a faint howl of a wolf off in the distance. Fenrir and Martha sat by the fireplace in the den of their house. Martha worked carefully with the light of the fire as she drew a needle and thread through a crimson fabric on her lap. Meanwhile, Fenrir sat with a look of deep thought across his face and a smoking pipe clenched between his teeth. After a moment, he finally spoke. After the completion of this final project, we will have enough money to travel the 6-day journey and live closer to your mother.
Thank you, my love. Mother has become weak, whether she admits it or not, and I fear she can no longer fend for herself as well as she used to. Are you certain that this move will not be too strenuous on you or the children?
Fenrir took a puff of his pipe and released the smoke slowly before speaking. Don't you worry, Martha. The journey is the simple part. I'll make sure to build our home next to your mother's so that our family may have room to grow. In the meantime, we can live in the cabin that's only a few kilometers from the small cottage while I make our new home. It's not big, but it'll do so that we don't end up stepping on each other's toes in your mother's small cottage.
I've offered Mother the chance to come and live with us closer to town, and for us to move closer to her. But she shares my father's stubbornness, God rest his sweet soul. She asked that we not go through the trouble of moving the family to her, but she's far too old to be alone in the woods. I don't know how a widow of her age manages to live on her own so far out towards the woods.
She's a tough old woman, and she's passed that strength on to you. Why do you think I chose to marry you?
You hush that forked tongue of yours before it gets you into any trouble.
They laughed softly as the final embers on the fire began to die out. A few weeks later, Fenrir and his family packed up and prepared to leave. They sold what possessions they no longer needed and loaded up the rest on the 2 carts, which would be drawn by the family horses Cascade and Wisp. Fenretta and Martin were eager to go and had already finished packing the few items they owned. Fenretta ran out of the house with a sheepskin bag over her shoulder and hopped into the first cart with her mother.
Martin, hurry, or we're leaving without you.
Martin called out from inside the house.
If you do, then who would protect you?
Papa would still be here to watch over me.
You have a heart of ice sometimes, little sister, but you're lucky I love you all the same.
Martin stepped out of the now empty house with the remainder of his possessions tied up in a bundle over his shoulder and neatly folded red garment cradled under one arm. "Don't forget the hood Mother made for you. The winds carry a deeper chill the closer we get to the Nightroad Woods. Not to mention, Mother wove the fabric of her very love into that hood for your sake." Fenretta reached out and took her red hood from her brother and flung it over her shoulders sheepishly.
Don't go losing that hood now. You'll catch your death of cold without it.
Fenretta nodded and slumped back down in her seat. The trip was, by the most part, uneventful. The family spent the first 2 nights lodged in comfortable inns along the way through the neighboring towns. However, the chill of the fall seasons was in the air, and Fenretta was dreading the 3rd night of the trip because she knew that after her family departed the 2nd town, that there would be no more forms of civilization until they reached the cabin by Nightroad Woods. The cold was not the root of Fenretta's fears, though. Her red hood kept her warm and secure from the cold daggers of wind and the icy kiss of the nightly frost. Fenretta feared the stories of the wolves that were rumored to still lurk in the Nightroad Woods. Stories were passed down from the village elders about the fierce monsters that would feast on the hearts of brave men and could rip a rider and his horse to pieces should they make the mistake of crossing the path of such a wild beast. On the 3rd day of travel, Fenretta rode in the cart with her brother and sat with him as he steered the horse-drawn cart. The day was cold and gray, with a shrill wind that threatened to bring a storm from the south.
Brother, can I ask you something?
Hi, what is it, Red?
Are the stories about the wolves of Nightroad true? Do they really eat the hearts of brave men to live for 100 years?
Martin didn't look at her, but instead looked straight forward and allowed a moment of silence to pass before he finally spoke. Aye, they be true. Berserker wild beasts that survive off of human flesh. But the stories are wrong. They don't go after brave men. They devour anyone that happens to wander into their territory. They especially love the taste of innocent young girls named Red.
Stop that!
Martin laughed and looked over at his sister. No one has reported seeing a wolf in Ireland in over a decade, little sister. Grandfather hunted and killed the very last wolf in Nightroad Forest before either of us was born. Grandmother has the pelt of the very last beast hung over her bed as a reminder of grandfather's bravery.
But how do you know? How does anyone know that they're all gone?
Martin knew that his little sister was scaring herself and would not be satisfied until he told her something that would set her mind at ease. He looked over at her as she drew the red hood tighter around herself, just as the wind picked up. Well, wolves are like the cold, dear sister. You can guard against the cold with the red hood. Likewise, you can guard against a wolf with the color of protection. The red hood is all you need to keep you safe. They can neither stalk you nor harm you as long as you wear your red armor.
Really? Is that why Mother made it for me?
Martin only nodded and smiled at his sister with a look of satisfaction. It was a lie, but wolves were now nothing more but a creature of legend and songs throughout the land. Grandfather had indeed hunted the beasts into oblivion and hung the pelt of the last and biggest beast anyone had ever seen. It was the trophy that marked the end of the wolf's reign over the Nightroad Forest. On the 3rd night, Fenrir and Martin lit a fire and tied the horses to a tree, while Fenretta and Martha set up the wagons to sleep in that night. The night air was cold and clouds obstructed the view of the stars. Fenretta tucked herself in with her red hood wrapped around her. It gave her warmth and the feeling of security from the dangers of the beasts lurking through the night. The 2nd night of sleeping in the wagons was very much the same, and the trip through the 4th and 5th days were relatively uneventful. Fenrir managed to shoot a deer and catch some wild rabbit for supper on the 5th day, and Martha made sure to cook the meat before storing it away for the rest of the trip. The family was met with some troubles on the final day of travel. The deeper the horses went into the dark forest, the more restless and uneasy they became.
Whoa, easy, Wisp, easy.
Fenrir calmly spoke to Wisp while tugging the reins of his horse. Martin also had to react quickly to keep Cascade under control as well, as the horse reacted to the clear fear given off by Wisp.
Whoa. What do you think is spooking the horses, Father?
Do you think it's a wolf? Are there wolves here?
Hush now, Red. You know there are no wolves here. The horses are just unfamiliar with these woods, that's all.
Your mother's right. Your grandfather slayed the last wolf that stalked these woods before either of you were born.
Martha looked over at Fenretta, who seemed to share in the horse's uneasiness to the darker surroundings. She knew that Martin had told her that her red cloak was a shield against the attacks of wolves, so she decided to play on that story.
When I was a young girl about your age, I was scared of the wolves too. My father, your grandfather, used to wear a red cloak and hunt the beasts of the forest to sell their pelts whenever he traveled to the market. After I married your father, he continued to slay wolves well after I went to live away in the town you grew up in. Your grandmother says he slayed the last wolf the day before your brother Martin was born. She told me it was the only day he ever forgot to wear his red cloak, and on that day, the biggest of the wolves came out. It managed to bite your grandfather in the arm, but he swiftly cut the beast's throat with his dagger. Sometime later, he passed on of old age, having completed the task of ridding the forest of the berserker beasts that threatened the safety of our family. The red cloak your grandfather wore was enough to frighten the biggest of beasts from ever confronting him. Now, your red hood will guard you against anything that may remain in these woods.
Red seemed more at ease after hearing the story of how her grandfather had gallantly slayed the wolves of the forest, and felt safer knowing that he also wore a red cloak to protect him from the advances of the creatures in the forest. The gray day had already begun to get dark, and the trees only helped to further enhance the darkness around the wagons. Fenrir lit the oil lamp on his cart, and Martin followed suit. The dim yellow flames did little to light the unkempt trail they followed through the forest.
It's only a bit further, and we should find the spare cabin up ahead.
The winds blew through the trees and carried the smell of rain with them. Dull thunder could be heard off in the distance, just barely over the sound of the horses' hooves on the uneven trail and the clattering of the wagon's wooden wheels on the uneven surface. A storm was chasing them, and would soon catch up if they didn't make haste to the cottage. The darkness extended further onwards, and the last bit of light slowly vanished as the family continued to move deeper into the dark woods. Red bundled up and sunk down into the cart. She wanted to feel safe and secure under her red hood, but the darkness and low rumble of an approaching storm only brought an ominous feeling. The horses neighed again and chomped at their bits nervously. Before anyone could say anything, the low rumble of thunder and winds through the woods was cut by a distant and very audible howl. The horses reared back, and it took a moment for Fenrir and Martin to regain control of Cascade and Wisp. Red's worst fears had now been confirmed, and she lay shivering between the bags and boxes of her family's possessions, trying to make herself as small as possible.
Whoa! There's no need to panic now. That howl was many kilometers away. We just need to keep moving forward.
Martin looked back at his mother and sister sitting in the back of his cart.
Don't worry, Red. We'll be within the safety of the cottage in no time. Everything will be all right. Just stay wrapped up in your hood. No harm will come to you.
Despite his words of comfort, Martin felt a pang of fear in his heart. Fenretta only let out a short moan of fear and dropped the red hood over her eyes. Nothing could prepare the family for the bone-chilling sound of the same wolf's howl
cutting through the trees. This time, it was closer. No one could deny the idea that they were now most likely being stalked. Without a second thought, Fenrir pulled a whip from behind him and snapped it hard in the air. Yeah! Quickly! Make haste to the cottage! Martin egged his horse forward and kept about a cart's length behind his father's cart. They bounced and jolted around as they rode over bumps and grooves of the unkempt path. Martin knew that by the sound of the howl, the wolf was not far behind and would easily find them if they didn't put distance between them fast. The horses blew out puffs of white breaths as they ran through the trees and huffed deeply at the strain of the weight they bear. Wisp carried a heavier load and was beginning to slow down, and in turn forced Martin to pull back on Cascade and slow his wagon as well. The sound of a snarl first reached Martin's ears, and then the shrill scream of Fenretta. He looked back to see the sprinting figure of a huge wolf running down the path towards the cart. Martha called out, "Wolf!" and Fenretta screamed. Fenrir cracked the whip again and again, this time landing the hits on the horse's rump. Wisp wasted no time in bolting forward faster than before. Fenrir could hear the sound of the wolf behind him and knew that the heavy cart was slowing his family down. Wisp was now grunting in exhaustion and foaming at the mouth. The path finally widened enough for Martin to pull his cart forward next to his father. Fenrir allowed his family to pass his cart. As they did this, he reached back and pulled his musket up. He could see the wolf sprinting only a few yards behind his cart and closing the gap fast. It was a massive brown wolf, bigger than any Fenrir had ever seen, almost 3/4 the size of his horse. He realized that there was no way he could possibly get a well-aimed shot with the cart bouncing as violently as it was, and even with the massive target as the wolf. He slung the rifle over his shoulder and cracked the whip again. It did little good in speeding the now exhausted horse. Blood was now foaming up in the poor creature's mouth. He knew that this poor and loyal steed had served its family well, but now it had to endure one final sacrifice. Goodbye, dear friend. I'm sorry, but I don't have any other choice. Fenrir stood up and prepared to jump over to the cart in which his family resided. Martin looked over and knew without words that he had to steer closer and slow down enough to give his father the chance he needed. With one massive jolt of energy, fueled by fear and determination, Fenrir vaulted over and reached for the side of the cart with both hands. As he did this, the musket slipped in mid-flight and fell to the ground, but Fenrir made it to the other cart. Wisp continued to run, but slowed his pace before tripping and colliding headfirst into the ground. The lantern on his cart illuminated the poor creature's final moments as a huge brown mass pounced on top of him and began to tear greedily into the horse's neck. The harness that served to pull the heavy cart now worked to the predator's advantage by anchoring the dying horse in place. Martha helped her husband climb into the cart and then turned her attention to Fenretta, who was looking out into the darkness and the shrinking illuminated figure of the carnage her family had just narrowly escaped. They made it to the cottage. However, most of the items they needed had been tucked away in Wisp's cart. Martin quickly led Cascade to the stables behind the cottage and then ran back to help his father unload the few items they had in the family cart. Quickly, boy! We don't know if the beast is alone in the woods or if it runs in a pack. Fenretta stood by the open cottage door, still wrapped in her red hood with tears streaming down her eyes.
Papa, will it come for us? Is there more out there? Are we going to be safe in here?
Red, go inside. We'll be safe as long as we stay inside. Help Mother light a fire and look for anything we may be able to use for torches.
Your brother's right. Go inside and help your mother. Martha knelt down and put her hands on Fenretta's shoulders as she spoke.
Come now, dear, you're all right. We're safe here.
The storm that had been at their heels had finally caught up. The old stone and wood cabin was sturdy, but years of wear and lack of maintenance showed through the cracks in the walls that allowed the storm to blow its shards of cold wind in, and the roof leaked with the angry tears of the rain that beat down on the roof. Lightning and thunder flared and boomed loudly as if the storm was the voice of the forest, objecting to the arrival of the Hayes family. All of this paled in comparison to the howls that could still be heard in the distance all through the night. By morning, the storm had passed, The sky was still gray, and the morning continued to carry the chill of the previous night. Martin was tasked with checking on Cascade and feeding him, while Fenrir and Martha went out to collect what they could from the wreckage of the abandoned cart. Fenretta stayed close to her older brother as he walked over to the stone stables.
It's all right now, Red. We're safe now. Here, help me feed Cascade, and then later we can go with Mother to see Grandma on the other side of the woods.
Grandma told Mother that Grandfather had slayed all the wolves. Why is there one still here?
Martin stayed quiet as he walked with Fenretta, unsure of how to answer her. He reached the stable door and began to open it before he finally uttered an answer.
I don't know, Red. It's been...
Fenretta screamed as soon as the light of the morning flooded into the stable to reveal the shredded remains of Cascade. The wolf had found them and made short work of the last horse. Large paw prints in mud and blood were smeared all over the floor like a calling card of the beast that had visited. The Hayes family was now stranded at the edge of the Nightroad Woods with a massive wolf on the loose and no means of escape.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and favorite. Oh, and hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on any future videos. Don't forget to check out the original content that made this video possible. Links are in the description below.